Michelle Cinder, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Roman, senior writer at The Dispatch, and author of In Trump's Shadow, David Drucker, and executive editor at Deadline, Dominic Patton. Okay, Christine, I'm going to begin with you on this. We talked about the dolls last week, and you thought it was going to resonate. It certainly has. Some people are calling it Donald Trump's Marie Antoinette moment. It is a message that he's sending to his voters that you're just going to have to deal with whatever I decide is best. And the markets certainly aren't responding well to that either.
It's so interesting to me. The president keeps talking about this transition that we're going to be going through. And frankly, the American people elected him because they didn't like the last transition that they were going through post-COVID when inflation was too high. And now he's trying to sort of message that you're going to have fewer choices and they're going to cost more money. And that's going to be good for you longer term. It also strikes me, which is so interesting, when you look at free market, patriotic capitalist Wall Street, you have a Republican president who's saying, this is what you should buy. Oh, by the way, I'm going to tell CEOs what they should do if I don't like it. And I'm going to enact tariffs, which, nobody's really done on a broad-based basis because they kind of aren't good for you. So it's just a fascinating place here. And the dolls thing, the doll comment, I think, has just resonated far longer than anything else I've heard from him in the past few days.
Do you have that Bernie Sanders quote that I wanted to bring up?
Oh, yeah, the Sanders quote. This is from May 2015, when I had forgotten about this, and you brought it up. You don't necessarily need a choice of 23 underarm spray deodorants or of 18 different pairs of sneakers when children are hungry in this country.
So what's interesting, the National Review brings up this Bernie Sanders quote and just talks about the hypocrisy here. I don't think you'll hear a lot of Republicans, again, the National Review saying this, criticizing the president for asserting that it's a good thing if America's little girls will have a choice of two more expensive dolls instead of the larger variety of less expensive dolls they're used to seeing. When Bernie Sanders says it, it's appalling and worth mocking. When Trump says it, every good Republican is obligated to avert his eyes, apparently. David, I'm going to give that to you. What's the deal with that? I mean, if Bernie said it, as the National Review points out, there would be guffaws and mocking from Republicans, anger even.
Yeah, well, I guess we're inaugurating a new faction of scarcity Republicans. Look, I think the bigger question here is how this resonates politically if it's not a blip. Americans, regardless of their political stripes, usually don't like the government telling them what they need, what they can buy, how much of those products they can buy, and what they're going to pay for them. It's one of the reasons why socialists like Bernie Sanders have had limited reach. Now, as a populist, his reach has grown over the past decade, but socialists, even in the Democratic Party, have always had limited reach. Look at Joe Biden winning the 2020 nomination for his party versus some of the more progressive candidates. And so I think the better question is not about the 20 dolls versus 3, but what about a family that doesn't earn that much or is struggling, and maybe they can only afford one doll, right? One gift. It matters a lot if the price goes up and they can no longer afford any. And, I think that is a better way to frame this both politically and economically. And I think, the question is, we know Democrats will find a way to push back on Trump because they're the opposition party. But will Republicans that have a problem with this, and privately many of them will this motivate them to speak up? I doubt it, because they're focused on the reconciliation package and don't want to get crosswise with Trump ahead of next year's Republican primaries. But it certainly puts them in a box moving forward if this sort of rhetoric from the president and these sorts of policies continue.
Some Republicans have spoken out. Rand Paul was on the floor of the Senate with Democrats trying to pass legislation that would give the authority on tariffs back to Congress, take it away from the president. You have Don Bacon in the House, Republican, talking about how the agricultural community is very worried. So there are people that are coming out and speaking up on the broader threat of tariffs. I've even heard Ted Cruz talk about this. But as you said, are they going to come out more pointedly? We're going to wait to see if that happens or not. They are focused on other stuff. Yamiche, the White House, though, I wonder how sensitive they are to market reaction and headlines. I just heard that Donald Trump, in speaking about the NFL draft coming to Washington, D.C., said he's going to meet with Hollywood executives to see how they feel about these tariffs.
Well, this is really interesting because the president came out and said that these tariffs were going to be put into place, but the White House, through spokespeople, immediately said, well, no final decision has been made. That being said, we should remind folks what President said just yesterday when he was coming back to the White House. Take a listen.
Other nations have been stealing the movie-making capabilities from the United States. And I said to a couple of people, what do you think? I've done some very strong research over the last week, and we're making very few movies now. Hollywood is being destroyed. If they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in.
Okay, welcome. You're here because you want to get straight to the point on important issues.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're looking at President Trump's goal post 100 days. He's talking about a big, beautiful tax bill.
Right.
Our information for this deep dive comes primarily from MSNBC reporting.
Okay.
Now, look, executive orders are one thing, but a tax bill, that needs Congress. That's the crux of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a whole different ballgame.
So the real question we're digging into, based on this MSNBC analysis, is what are the hurdles here? Can this bill actually get passed? And, well, what happens if it does or doesn't?
Yeah, and MSNBC points out something interesting right away about Trump's strategy.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, they describe him as staying kind of on the sidelines, sort of
So-
positioned to take the credit if it works.
Or assign blame if it doesn't.
Exactly. Which, MSNBC flags as potentially quite risky, especially given the main obstacle.
Okay, let's talk about that obstacle. Funding. MSNBC seems really clear on this.
Crystal clear. It's the core problem.
Because we're talking about some pretty significant promises made during the campaign, right?
Oh, definitely. Things like ending the tax on tips. That was a big one.
And on overtime pay, too.
Yep. Plus, raising the SALT cap, that state and local tax deduction limit.
And maybe the biggest one, making the 2017 tax cuts permanent.
That's a massive cost right there.
So a really hefty price tag overall.
Extremely hefty. And MSNBC's analysis is, well, pretty blunt about paying for it.
How so?
They basically say it's almost impossible to fund all this without making significant cuts to big programs. We're talking Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security.
Wow. Okay. That immediately flags potential political dynamite, doesn't it?
It really does. And it
Yeah.
sets up this internal conflict within the Republican Party.
Right, because they're not all on the same page here, are they? MSNBC highlights that split.
Yeah, you've got like moderate Republicans, especially from high tax states. They really want that SALT cap fixed.
Makes sense. Their voters feel that pinch directly, that limit on deducting state and local taxes.
Exactly. But then you have the Freedom Caucus.
Uh-huh. More fiscally conservative wing.
Right. And according to MSNBC, their big demand is deep spending cuts. Like, show us the cuts before we talk tax changes.
So completely different priorities, pulling them apart.
Pretty much. But a real tug of war.
And Trump's role in brokering this. MSNBC says he's, just waiting?
That seems to be the portrayal. Sort of waiting it out, not really jumping into the negotiations directly.
And MSNBC thinks that's risky.
Yeah, they frame it as a risky move. Because, historically, GOP infighting like this usually gets resolved through some kind of compromise, some deal-making.
One steps in to broker it.
Usually. But Trump seems to be holding back from that, at least for now, which is a bit different.
So why is it different this time? Why isn't that usual compromise happening or looking likely?
Well, according to MSNBC's read, it boils down to this. The math doesn't add up.
Just fundamentally, the numbers don't work.
That seems to be their assessment. Given the scale of the tax cut promises and the strong resistance to the kind of spending cuts needed to pay for them.
So it's not just political disagreement, it's like an accounting problem almost.
Kind of, yeah. And the significance here is pretty big, as MSNBC points out.
How so?
This tax bill could be Trump's first real major legislative test since leaving office. A big showdown.
Right. A measure of his influence now.
Exactly. How this goes down could tell us a lot about his leadership pull within the party and, maybe shape his strategy going forward, thinking about 2024.
Okay, so let's recap quickly. Based on the MSNBC reporting we've looked at, this tax bill faces some serious headwinds.
Definitely.
You've got the funding problem, how to pay for it all. You've got deep splits inside the Republican Party, a SALT cap versus spending cuts.
Competing demands.
And you have President Trump himself currently sort of staying out of the direct negotiation fray.
A strategy MSNBC terms risky.
The stakes feel really high. This could genuinely be a defining moment for understanding Trump's current political capital.
Absolutely. Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener. We know political compromise is, well, usually the name of the game, historically.
Things eventually get hammered out.
So what unique factors, based on everything we've discussed, might actually prevent a deal this time? And maybe think bigger picture. If they can't resolve this, what might the wider consequences be beyond just this one tax bill?
Right.
What could that kind of impasse signal?